The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones of Windsor Castle, as Queen Consort Camilla prepared for what should have been a routine ceremonial inspection. The annual review of the Royal Guards was a tradition spanning centuries, where members of the royal family would walk among the perfectly aligned soldiers, acknowledging their service and dedication to the crown. Today, however, the atmosphere felt different, charged with an underlying tension that seemed to follow the Queen Consort wherever she went. Camilla adjusted her navy blue coat dress, its tailored lines complementing her role, while maintaining the dignity expected of her position. The pearl necklace at her throat caught the light as she moved, a gift from the late Queen Elizabeth that she wore on official occasions like this. Despite years in the royal family, she still felt the weight of scrutiny from both the public and the press, who seemed to analyze her every gesture, every expression, every interaction with microscopic intensity. The Royal Guard stood at attention in their iconic red tunics and tall black bearskin hats, their faces stoic and professional. These were men and women who had dedicated their lives to serving the monarchy, many having served in active military duty before earning their prestigious positions. They represented the finest of British military tradition, and their discipline was legendary. Each guard had undergone rigorous training not just in ceremony and protocol, but in actual security and protection duties. As Camilla began her inspection, walking slowly along the line of guards, photographers and journalists positioned themselves at respectful distances, their cameras ready to capture what they hoped would be dignified images for the evening news in tomorrow's newspapers. The ceremony was being broadcast live, adding another layer of pressure to an already formal occasion. Millions of viewers across the Commonwealth were watching, expecting to see the monarchy functioning with its characteristic precision and grace. The Queen Consort's personal protection officer, a seasoned professional named Detective Inspector Sarah Matthews, walked a few steps behind, her trained eyes constantly scanning the crowd and surroundings. Sarah had been with the Royal Protection Unit for over 15 years and had developed an instinct for reading situations and people. Today, she noticed something subtle in the Queen Consort's demeanor, a slight stiffness in her shoulders, a barely perceptible tightening around her eyes that suggested inner tension. Prince William and Catherine, the Prince and Princess of Wales, were also present for the ceremony, along with their children Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. The children, dressed in their formal attire, stood quietly beside their parents, having been coached on proper behavior for such occasions. Princess Charlotte, at 11 years old, was particularly observant, her bright eyes taking in every detail of the formal proceedings around her. The young princess had always been remarkably perceptive for her age, often noticing things that adults missed. Her teachers at school frequently commented on her emotional intelligence and her ability to read social situations with unusual clarity. Today she sensed something was not quite right, though she couldn't immediately identify what it was. Her grandmother Camilla seemed more rigid than usual, her smile appearing forced rather than natural. As the inspection continued, one of the Royal Guards, a young man named Lance Corporal James Mitchell, began to show signs of distress. James had been feeling unwell since early morning, but had been determined not to miss this important ceremony. The combination of his illness, the heavy uniform, and the pressure of standing perfectly still for an extended period in the warming sun was taking its toll. Small beads of perspiration began to form on his forehead beneath his bearskin hat, and his breathing became slightly labored. The other guards near James noticed his condition but maintained their positions, as protocol demanded. Moving or speaking during a formal inspection was strictly forbidden, unless there was an immediate emergency. James fought to maintain his composure, knowing that any breach of protocol during a live ceremony would reflect poorly not just on him, but on his entire unit and the Royal Guards as an institution. Queen Consort Camilla approached James's position in the line, preparing to offer the traditional nod of acknowledgement that each guard would receive. However, as she drew closer, James's condition worsened dramatically. The young soldier's face had gone pale, and he was struggling to maintain his rigid posture. The combination of feeling unwell and the pressure of the moment was overwhelming his ability to continue standing at attention. Detective Inspector Matthews noticed the guard's distress and subtly moved closer, her hand instinctively moving toward her radio to call for medical assistance if needed. The ceremony's organizers, positioned around the perimeter of the courtyard, also became aware that something was amiss, though they were uncertain about the appropriate response that wouldn't disrupt the formal proceedings. The moment of crisis was approaching rapidly, and everyone present could sense it, though most were unsure how to respond within the constraints of royal protocol. The cameras continued rolling. The crowd watched expectantly, and the Queen Consort moved steadily closer to the struggling guard, unaware of the drama that was about to unfold and how it would test not only her composure but also challenge the very foundations of royal ceremony and tradition. The tension in the air was palpable as multiple factors converged toward what would become a defining moment for everyone present, particularly for a young princess whose quick thinking and compassionate nature would soon prove more valuable than years of protocol training and ceremonial tradition. Lance Corporal James Mitchell felt his world beginning to spin as the Queen Consort approached his position in the ceremonial line. The morning that had started with such promise and pride was quickly becoming his worst nightmare. James had earned his position among the Royal Guards through years of dedicated service, first as a regular soldier in Afghanistan, then through the rigorous selection process that fewer than 1 in 50 applicants successfully completed. This ceremony represented the pinnacle of his military career, and now he was on the verge of collapsing in front of the entire royal family and a live television audience. The weight of his bearskin hat, normally something he wore with pride, now felt crushing. The thick red tunic that symbolized centuries of tradition seemed to be suffocating him. His vision began to blur around the edges and he could feel his knees threatening to buckle. Yet his military training and sense of duty kept him fighting to maintain his position. In the Guards, there was a saying that you stood at attention until you fell down, and even then you fell down at attention. Queen Consort Camilla continued her measured pace along the line of guards, acknowledging each with the slight nod that protocol demanded. She was experienced enough in royal ceremonies to maintain her composure regardless of circumstances, having learned through years of public scrutiny that every gesture was analyzed and interpreted. Her face remained pleasantly neutral, her posture erect and dignified, giving no indication of the personal struggles she faced daily as a member of the most scrutinized family in the world. However, as she drew within 3 guards of James's position, she noticed something that made her pause almost imperceptibly. The young guard's face had taken on a grayish pallor, and she could see a slight tremor in his hands despite his efforts to remain perfectly still. Her years of experience at public events had taught her to recognize the signs of someone in distress, whether from illness, nerves, or other causes. Princess Charlotte, standing with her family approximately 20 feet away, had been watching the ceremony with the intense focus that characterized her approach to everything. Unlike many children her age who might have been bored by such formal proceedings, Charlotte found herself fascinated by the intricate choreography of royal protocol. She had been studying the guards, noting their perfect posture and synchronized movements, when she noticed the same troubling signs that had caught her grandmother's attention. The young princess had an unusual gift for reading people and situations. Her parents often marveled at her ability to sense when someone was upset or troubled, even when they were trying to hide it. Teachers at her school had noted the same quality, describing Charlotte as remarkably empathetic and intuitive for someone so young. Today, that intuition was telling her that something was seriously wrong with one of the guards. As Queen Consort Camilla took another step closer to James, the situation reached a critical point. The young soldier's breathing became rapid and shallow, and sweat was now clearly visible on his face despite the cool morning air. His military discipline was the only thing keeping him upright, but even that was reaching its limits. The other guards in the line could sense their colleagues' distress but remained locked in position by centuries of protocol and tradition. Detective Inspector Sarah Matthews, monitoring the situation from her position behind the Queen Consort, recognized the signs of an impending medical emergency. Her finger moved to her radio, ready to call for the medical team that was always stationed nearby during royal events. However, calling for medical assistance during the ceremony would create a significant disruption, potentially ruining the event and certainly generating negative headlines about the Royal Guard's inability to maintain their duties. The media, representatives present were becoming aware that something interesting was developing. Photographers adjusted their positions slightly, and television directors quietly instructed their camera operators to focus on the area where the drama was unfolding. In the modern age of instant communication and social media, any unusual incident during a royal ceremony would be analyzed, discussed, and potentially criticized within minutes of occurring. Prince William and Catherine exchanged a subtle glance, both recognizing that their daughter Charlotte was focusing intently on something specific in the ceremony. They knew their daughter well enough to understand that when she concentrated so intensely on something, it usually meant she had noticed something important that others might have missed. Catherine gently placed her hand on Charlotte's shoulder, a silent question about what had captured her attention. James Mitchell made one final, desperate attempt to maintain his position as the Queen Consort approached. He straightened his shoulders, locked his knees, and tried to focus on a point in the distance, using every technique his training had taught him for maintaining composure under pressure. But his body was betraying him, and he could feel consciousness beginning to slip away despite his best efforts. The Queen Consort was now directly in front of James, preparing to offer him the traditional acknowledgement. Up close, she could clearly see his distress, and her expression began to shift from ceremonial neutrality to genuine concern. Her instincts as both a grandmother and someone who had spent years in public service told her that this young man needed immediate help. Regardless of protocol or tradition, in that critical moment, as James swayed slightly and the Queen Consort's concern transformed into alarm, everyone present held their breath, sensing that they were about to witness something that would be remembered and discussed for years to come. The collision between human compassion and rigid protocol was about to create a moment that would test everyone involved and potentially change how such situations were handled in the future. The moment of crisis arrived with stunning suddenness. Lance Corporal James Mitchell, despite his valiant efforts to maintain his ceremonial position, began to sway noticeably. His face had turned an alarming shade of gray, and his breathing had become labored to the point where other guards could hear his distress, despite the formal silence required during the inspection. The bearskin hat that represented such honor and tradition now seemed to be contributing to his physical distress, and sweat was streaming down his face despite the cool morning air. Queen Consort Camilla found herself in an unprecedented position. Standing directly in front of the struggling guard, she could see that he was on the verge of collapse. Her grandmother instincts, honed through years of caring for her own grandchildren and step-grandchildren, kicked in immediately. This was no longer about ceremony or protocol. This was about a young man who clearly needed immediate help, and she was in the best position to provide it. Without thinking about the cameras, the live television coverage, or the hundreds of spectators watching the ceremony, Camilla stepped forward and reached out toward James. Her intention was purely compassionate, to steady him, to offer support, to prevent what appeared to be an inevitable fall that could seriously injure the young soldier. In her mind, human welfare took precedence over any ceremonial considerations, and her natural instinct was to help someone in distress. However, what Camilla didn't realize in that moment of crisis was that touching a royal guard during a formal ceremony was a serious breach of protocol that could have significant consequences. The guards are trained to maintain their positions regardless of circumstances, and any physical contact from a member of the royal family during a ceremonial inspection was unprecedented and potentially problematic. The action, while well-intentioned, could be misinterpreted by the media, criticized by protocol experts, and potentially embarrass both the Queen Consort and the Royal Guards as an institution. Detective Inspector Sarah Matthews, monitoring the situation closely, immediately recognized the potential complications of the Queen Consort's instinctive response. While she understood and appreciated Camilla's compassionate motivation, she also knew that images of the Queen Consort appearing to grab or touch a guard could be taken out of context and used to create negative stories about the royal family's relationship with the military. The media had a long history of turning innocent moments into controversies, and this situation had all the elements needed for such a transformation. Princess Charlotte, who had been watching the developing crisis with increasing concern, suddenly realized what was about to happen. Her young mind, unencumbered by adult hesitations about protocol and propriety, saw the situation with crystal clarity. She understood that her grandmother was trying to help the guard out of kindness, but she also sensed somehow that this help might not be received as intended. Her intuitive understanding of people and situations told her that intervention was needed, not for the guard, but for her grandmother. The young princess had learned much about royal protocol through observation and gentle instruction from her parents and grandparents. She understood that there were rules and traditions that governed how members of the royal family behaved in public, especially during formal ceremonies. While she might not have known the specific details of why touching a guard during inspection might be problematic, her instincts told her that the situation was becoming complicated in ways that adults might not immediately recognize. In the split second that followed, as Queen Consort Camilla's hand moved toward the struggling guard, Princess Charlotte made a decision that demonstrated wisdom far beyond her 11 years. Without hesitation, she stepped forward from her position with her parents and moved quickly but quietly toward her grandmother. Her movement was so smooth and natural that most observers thought she was simply adjusting her position or perhaps moving closer to get a better view of the ceremony. Prince William and Catherine watched their daughter's movement with surprise but not alarm. They trusted Charlotte's judgment and had learned that when she acted with such purpose, she usually had good reason. They remained in position but kept their attention focused on their daughter, ready to respond if needed while allowing her the independence to handle whatever situation she had identified. The photographers and camera operators, focused primarily on capturing the Queen Consort's interaction with the guards, initially paid little attention to Princess Charlotte's movement. Most assumed she was simply repositioning herself for a better view or responding to some instruction from her parents. The significance of her action wouldn't become clear until several moments later, when the full implications of what she had prevented became apparent to everyone present. James Mitchell, meanwhile, continued his desperate struggle to maintain consciousness and proper posture. The approaching help from the Queen Consort was something his increasingly confused mind couldn't quite process. His military training told him to remain at attention regardless of circumstances, while his failing body was telling him that collapse was inevitable. The conflict between duty and physical necessity was creating a mental fog that made it difficult for him to understand what was happening around him. As Princess Charlotte reached her grandmother's side, the critical moment arrived. The Queen Consort's hand was extended toward the guard, her face showing clear concern and determination to help. The cameras were recording every second. The crowd was watching with increasing attention as they sensed something unusual was happening. And the other guards remained locked in their ceremonial positions despite their awareness of their colleagues' distress. What happened next would be talked about for years afterward, not just as an example of quick thinking and family loyalty, but as a demonstration of how sometimes the youngest member of a group can see solutions that escape more experienced adults. Princess Charlotte's intervention was about to transform a potential crisis into a moment that would enhance rather than damage the royal family's reputation. In the crucial moment when Queen Consort Camilla's hand was about to make contact with the struggling royal guard, Princess Charlotte acted with remarkable presence of mind. She gently but firmly reached out and caught her grandmother's wrist, not roughly or dramatically, but with the kind of subtle intervention that showed both respect for her elder and understanding of the delicate situation unfolding before them. "Grandmama," Charlotte whispered softly, her voice barely audible to anyone beyond the immediate vicinity. "Perhaps we should call for help instead." The young princess's words and actions had an immediate effect. Queen Consort Camilla, surprised by her granddaughter's intervention, paused and looked down at Charlotte. In that brief moment of eye contact, she saw something in the 11-year-old's expression that made her reconsider her intended action. Charlotte's eyes conveyed not disrespect or contradiction, but a gentle suggestion that there might be a better way to handle the situation. Camilla's natural instinct was still to help the clearly distressed guard, but Charlotte's intervention gave her a moment to think beyond her immediate emotional response. The Queen Consort had enough experience with royal protocol to recognize that her granddaughter might be seeing something she had missed in her concern for the young soldier's welfare. Charlotte's gentle restraint provided a pause that allowed wisdom to catch up with compassion. Lance Corporal James Mitchell, meanwhile, was reaching the absolute limit of his endurance. His vision was tunneling, his hearing had become muffled, and his legs were trembling with the effort of remaining upright. The heavy ceremonial uniform that he normally wore with such pride now felt like an anchor dragging him down. Yet even in his deteriorating condition, his military discipline kept him fighting to maintain his position, unwilling to let down his unit or embarrass the royal guards in front of such distinguished company. Detective Inspector Sarah Matthews, who had been moving closer to the developing crisis, immediately understood the significance of Princess Charlotte's intervention. As an experienced protection officer, she recognized that the young princess had potentially prevented a situation that could have been misinterpreted by the media or created uncomfortable precedents for future ceremonies. Matthews quickly stepped forward and spoke in a low, professional voice. "Your Majesty, shall I call for the medical team?" she asked, offering a solution that would address the guards' obvious distress while maintaining proper protocol. Princess Charlotte's quick thinking had created space for this more appropriate response. Rather than the Queen Consort being photographed appearing to grab or support a guard, which could have been misrepresented in news reports, the situation could now be handled through proper channels. The young princess had intuitively understood that sometimes the best way to help someone is to ensure that help comes from the right source in the right manner. Queen Consort. Camilla nodded gratefully to Detective Inspector Matthews, then looked down at Charlotte with a mixture of pride and appreciation. "Thank you, darling," she said quietly, recognizing that her granddaughter had shown remarkable wisdom in a challenging moment. The brief exchange between grandmother and granddaughter demonstrated the kind of mutual respect and understanding that had developed in their relationship over the years. Matthews immediately activated her radio with practiced efficiency. "Medical team to position 7 quietly and quickly," she communicated in the coded language used for such situations. Within moments, 2 paramedics in plain clothes began making their way through the crowd, carrying a discreet medical bag and moving with the kind of professional calm that would not alarm spectators or disrupt the ceremony more than necessary. The television cameras and photographers present began to understand that something significant was happening, but the way the situation was being handled made it clear that this was a medical issue being professionally managed, rather than any kind of protocol breach or dramatic incident. The presence of Princess Charlotte at her grandmother's side added a human element to the scene that observers found touching rather than concerning. James Mitchell, sensing that help was approaching but still fighting to maintain his ceremonial position, felt a wave of relief mixed with professional concern. He was grateful that his distress had been noticed and that assistance was coming, but he worried about the impact his condition might have on the ceremony and the reputation of the royal guards. Even in his weakened state, his dedication to his duty and his unit remained paramount in his thoughts. The other guards in the ceremonial line maintained their positions with admirable discipline, though several were clearly concerned about their colleagues' welfare. Their training had prepared them for various situations, but watching a fellow guard struggle while being unable to immediately assist tested their emotional control as well as their professional discipline. The arrival of medical personnel provided reassurance that their colleague would receive proper care. Prince William and Catherine, watching from their positions nearby, felt immense pride in their daughter's mature response to a difficult situation. They had always known that Charlotte possessed unusual emotional intelligence and social awareness, but seeing her handle such a delicate moment with grace and wisdom confirmed their belief that she was developing into someone who could handle the responsibilities that would eventually come with her position in the royal family. As the medical team reached James Mitchell's position, they worked with remarkable discretion, assessing his condition while maintaining the dignity of the ceremony. One paramedic positioned himself to provide physical support if needed, while the other quickly checked vital signs and administered assistance. Their professional training in handling medical emergencies in public settings was evident in their calm, efficient approach to the situation. The crisis that had threatened to disrupt the ceremony and potentially create negative publicity was being transformed into an example of how proper protocol, family wisdom, and professional expertise could work together to ensure that everyone's welfare was protected while maintaining the dignity and tradition that such ceremonies represented. The medical team's arrival transformed the entire atmosphere of the ceremony from one of potential crisis to one of professional competence and human compassion. The lead paramedic, a veteran named Martin Webb, who had extensive experience with public events and royal ceremonies, approached Lance Corporal Mitchell with the perfect balance of urgency and discretion. Martin had worked these types of events for over a decade and understood that his primary goal was not just to provide medical care, but to do so in a way that preserved the dignity of both the patient and the ceremony. "Easy there," "Soldier," Martin whispered as he moved into position beside James. "We're going to take care of you, but I need you to let us help." His voice was calm and authoritative, the kind of tone that immediately conveyed competence and reliability. James, his consciousness fading in and out, felt an overwhelming sense of relief at finally being able to accept the help he desperately needed. Princess Charlotte remained at her grandmother's side, watching the professional medical response with fascination and concern. Her intervention had created the space necessary for this proper response, and now she was learning valuable lessons about leadership, crisis management, and the importance of thinking beyond immediate reactions. The young princess was beginning to understand that sometimes the most helpful thing you can do is ensure that the right people are able to provide the right kind of help. Queen Consort Camilla, no longer focused on her immediate impulse to physically assist the guard, was able to step back and observe the situation from a more appropriate distance. However, her concern for James remained evident in her expression and posture. She watched carefully as the medical team worked, ready to provide any assistance that might be needed while respecting their professional expertise and maintaining proper protocol. The second paramedic, Sarah Chen, quickly but discreetly checked James's vital signs while Martin provided physical support. Their assessment was swift and thorough, determining that James was suffering from a combination of dehydration, low blood sugar, and heat exhaustion, exacerbated by the stress of the formal ceremony. These were common issues in situations involving long periods of standing at attention in heavy uniforms, especially when individuals hadn't eaten properly or were fighting off minor illnesses. "We need to get him cooled down and rehydrated," Sarah whispered to Martin, who nodded and began organizing their next steps. The beauty of their approach was that to most observers it appeared that the guards were simply being attended to as part of the normal ceremony. The medical team's plain clothes and discreet equipment meant that their intervention didn't create the kind of dramatic scene that might have overshadowed the event's intended purpose. Detective Inspector Matthews coordinated quietly with the ceremony's organizers to ensure that the formal inspection could continue while James received the care he needed. Her experience in managing unexpected situations during royal events proved invaluable in maintaining the balance between addressing the medical emergency and preserving the ceremony's dignity. She also made sure that the incident was being documented properly for later review and potential improvements to protocol. James Mitchell, with medical support now available, finally allowed himself to accept help without feeling that he was abandoning his duty. The paramedics helped him to a nearby chair that had been discreetly positioned, where he could receive treatment while still remaining part of the ceremonial setting. His relief was visible as the immediate physical distress began to ease with proper medical attention. The other royal guards, seeing their colleague receiving appropriate care, were able to refocus on their ceremonial duties with renewed concentration. The professional handling of the situation reinforced their confidence in the support systems that existed to protect their welfare while maintaining their ability to perform their important roles. Their respect for the royal family was enhanced by witnessing the genuine concern shown for one of their members. Queen Consort Camilla, with the immediate crisis resolved, was able to continue the ceremonial inspection. However, the experience had been transformative for her understanding of protocol, compassion, and the wisdom that could come from unexpected sources. She found herself looking at Princess Charlotte with new appreciation for the young girl's intuitive understanding of complex social situations and her ability to provide guidance, even to her elders. The photographers and television cameras had captured the entire sequence of events, but rather than creating negative publicity, the images told a story of family cooperation, professional competence, and genuine care for individual welfare. The pictures of Princess Charlotte gently guiding her grandmother, the discreet medical response, and the successful continuation of the ceremony became powerful symbols of how the royal family handled unexpected challenges. Prince William and Catherine exchanged proud glances as they watched their daughter's continued involvement in ensuring the situation was properly managed. Charlotte remained close to her grandmother, not as a child seeking attention, but as a supportive family member who understood that her role was to provide quiet assistance when needed. Her maturity and judgment in the situation impressed not only her parents but everyone who witnessed her actions. As James Mitchell's condition stabilized and the ceremony continued, It became clear that what could have been an embarrassing incident or protocol breach had instead become an example of how quick thinking, professional expertise, and family solidarity could transform a potential crisis into a demonstration of the values that the monarchy represented. The young princess's intervention had prevented a well-meaning but potentially problematic action and had created space for the proper response that served everyone's interest. The ceremony proceeded with renewed focus and dignity, with James remaining present but receiving continued medical monitoring. The experience had shown everyone involved that sometimes the most important leadership comes not from following established rules blindly, but from understanding when wisdom and compassion require a different approach to familiar situations. The remainder of the ceremonial inspection proceeded with a renewed sense of purpose and unity. Lance Corporal James Mitchell, now stable and receiving ongoing medical attention, remained present for the ceremony from his position in the chair provided by the medical team. His color had returned, and while he was still weak, the immediate crisis had passed. The paramedics continued to monitor his condition discreetly, ensuring he remained hydrated and comfortable, while allowing him to maintain his dignity as a member of the Royal Guards. Queen Consort Camilla completed her inspection of the remaining guards with a deeper appreciation for the human element behind the ceremonial tradition. Each guard she encountered received not just the traditional formal acknowledgement, but also a moment of genuine recognition that conveyed her respect for their service and her awareness of the physical and emotional demands of their role. The near crisis with James had reminded everyone present that behind the pageantry and tradition were real people making real sacrifices. Princess Charlotte remained close to her grandmother throughout the rest of the ceremony, her presence serving as a quiet reminder of the wisdom and compassion that had prevented a difficult situation from becoming worse. The young princess had learned valuable lessons about leadership, quick thinking, and the importance of considering all aspects of a situation before acting. Her intervention had not only protected her grandmother from potential embarrassment, but it also ensured that James received the most appropriate care possible. The media coverage of the event, rather than focusing on a protocol breach or medical emergency, instead highlighted the professionalism of all involved and the caring nature of the royal family. Photographs of Princess Charlotte's gentle intervention, Queen Consort Camilla's obvious concern for the guards' welfare, and the discreet medical response created a narrative about compassion, wisdom, and effective crisis management that reflected positively on everyone involved. Detective Inspector Sarah Matthews conducted a brief review of the incident with her team, identifying lessons learned and potential improvements for future ceremonies. The successful management of the situation reinforced existing protocols while highlighting the importance of flexibility and quick thinking in unexpected circumstances. Her report would contribute to enhanced preparation for similar events in the future, ensuring that medical support was even more readily available and that all staff understood their roles in managing emergencies discreetly. Prince William and Catherine spent considerable time that evening discussing the day's events with their children, using the experience as a teaching moment about responsibility, compassion, and the importance of thinking carefully before acting. Princess Charlotte's actions were praised not just for their effectiveness, but for the wisdom and maturity they demonstrated. The conversation reinforced the family's values about service, consideration for others, and the importance of using one's position to help rather than to dominate. Lance Corporal James Mitchell was taken to a nearby medical facility for further evaluation and treatment, where doctors confirmed that he had indeed been suffering from dehydration and exhaustion, but that there were no serious underlying health issues. His commanding officers visited him personally, expressing their appreciation for his dedication and assuring him that his commitment to duty, even while unwell, reflected the finest traditions of the Royal Guards. They also implemented new protocols to ensure better monitoring of guard welfare during extended ceremonies. The Royal Guards as an institution emerged from the incident with enhanced respect and appreciation, rather than being seen as rigid adherents to protocol regardless of human cost. They were recognized as dedicated professionals supported by thoughtful leadership and comprehensive care systems. The way the situation had been handled demonstrated that tradition and compassion could coexist and that the monarchy valued both ceremonial excellence and individual welfare. In the weeks following the ceremony, Princess Charlotte received numerous letters from people who had heard about her quick thinking and mature response to the crisis. Teachers, military personnel, and members of the public wrote to express their admiration for her wisdom and compassion. These letters became treasured additions to her personal collection and served as encouragement for her continued development as a future leader. Queen Consort Camilla often reflected on the events of that day, recognizing how her granddaughter's intervention had taught her important lessons about leadership and decision-making. The incident strengthened the bond between grandmother and granddaughter and provided Camilla with insights into Charlotte's character and potential that would influence their relationship for years to come. She frequently mentioned the incident as an example of how leadership could come from unexpected sources. The ceremony became a case study in crisis management and royal protocol, studied by courtiers, security professionals, and event organizers as an example of how to handle unexpected situations with grace and effectiveness. The combination of quick thinking, professional expertise, family cooperation, and genuine human concern created a model for managing similar situations in the future. Years later, when Lance Corporal James Mitchell had been promoted to sergeant and was training new guards, he would often tell the story of the day when a young princess's wisdom and a queen's compassion combined to create one of the most memorable and positive experiences of his military career. The incident had taught him and everyone involved that true strength comes not from rigid adherence to rules, but from the wisdom to know when compassion and flexibility serve the greater good. The day that began with the potential for embarrassment and crisis instead became a celebration of the values that made the monarchy relevant and respected: genuine concern for others, quick thinking in difficult situations, the wisdom to accept guidance from unexpected sources, and the understanding that true leadership means ensuring that everyone's welfare is protected and valued.